Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are excited to have Donna Brandelli joining us here. She's the owner of Brandelli Genealogy Services. That's right, she's a professional genealogist, and we're going to talk to her today about all the services she provides and, of course, how her research can help you all connect to your background in a sense. And this is just fascinating to hear these stories, how people connect, how people find out secrets, and so much more. So, Donna, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Glad to
Well,
be here.
thank you so much. So, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
I try to take all of the documentation I can locate that's still available and identify people's ancestors and I like to think of it as bringing people's ancestors to life
Yeah.
instead of just names and numbers on a piece of paper like the history that we read through high school, turning them into people that we can actually love and appreciate.
Oh my goodness. Well, hold on. I got to find out more about you before we get into all the services you provide and what it is that you do as a genealogist. So, let's tell them the website, how we can contact you to start.
Okay, my website is Brandelli Genealogy, Brandelli, genealogy.com.
Perfect. And do you have a phone number, any social media pages you want to promote as well?
It's my phone number and my Facebook page, everything is on the website. It's a one-stop shopping.
Yep.
So I always suggest going there because you can actually reach out to me with just a contact number and I can contact you. You can set up appointments, you can do everything right through my website.
Beautiful. Well, let's get to know you. Where are you from? And give us a little of your backstory as a child, how you figured out, this is something you wanted to do.
Well, I grew up in New England. I went to California, had another full-time career in California, moved back to New England. So this is the home of my ancestors, literally. I'm a descendant of Mayflower passengers and several Revolutionary War passengers. So over the years, I just became interested in my family history, just like anybody else is. And I know mostly as children, we don't think about it too much, right? It's like our grandparents are just talking. As adults, you said, I wish my grandparents were still around so we could still ask them questions. So what I did as an adult is I started emailing my grandma all the time because she was the one that was still living back here in New England and she had all the information on my ancestors. So like most people, we hear stories. I descended from William the Conqueror, Mayflower passengers, Revolution, but nobody had any proof. So I wanted to find the proof. And that's what I've done over the years is I found the proof of that. And to come back home, which is where I am now, I'm back home.
Where are you
I'm
specifically, by the way?
sorry,
Where do you live now?
Connecticut.
Okay, perfect.
I'm right on the Rhode Island border. So I grew up in Rhode Island. I live in Connecticut, right on the border, literally 10 minutes away. And this is the home of my ancestors. My Mayflower passengers came in. I'm a descendant of three of the four founders of Stonington, Connecticut. My family's had a constant presence in this area since the beginning. The
Wow.
church I go to, my great grandfather was the first minister of that
Oh my
church.
goodness.
So it's really nice to be back and have such a strong presence in a town where you have such a strong connection. And when I grew up around here, I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
any of this stuff. And it's interesting to find out with my research that I actually grew up just a couple blocks away from my great grandparents. And I never knew that.
Oh my
I never knew.
goodness. This is
Yeah.
fascinating, what you can learn about your history and so exciting. So did you do this as just a hobby or, what did you do for a career? I was reading about forensics.
Yeah, so in California, I lived in Los Angeles County, and I worked for two major law enforcement agencies in Los Angeles County, and I was a forensic investigator. I started out as a 911 operator,
Wow.
and then I became a forensic crime scene investigator, and then I eventually became the crime lab director at the agency and civilianized the crime scene unit. It went from a sworn law enforcement to civilians, which is what I was. I wasn't sworn. I wasn't the gunslinger. I was the
Mm-hmm.
person finding the information for them. And then it was a hobby. Genealogy has been a hobby for it was probably 20 years before I started doing this professionally. And then I retired. My husband was
Wow.
a fireman with the LA County LA County Fire Department. And he retired, I retired, and we moved back to Connecticut. So what do you do here? I was too young to just sit home and do
Mm-hmm.
nothing. but I couldn't find a job out here. Everybody wanted me to start at the bottom. They wanted me,
Yeah.
I had 25 years experience. I couldn't start at the bottom.
No,
So I
absolutely
said, okay,
not.
I'll take my hobby and I'll reinvent myself. So I did that. I made it a profession.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. This is
Yeah.
amazing work that you do, and you're helping so many people. I read some of the reviews. We're going to talk about that as well. Some of the people
Thank you.
you're helping. And first and foremost for today, I know you kind of wanted to start it off to break it down by talking about some overlooked sources for research, right? Scrapbooks, personal diaries, old newspapers, and even social media these days.
Yeah. Yes. So it's interesting because a lot of people when they start doing genealogy, and I did it, a lot of the things I talk about when I do presentations is that I've made these mistakes I'm telling you not to do. So, you grab the first shaky leaf. That's when I started Ancestry. I had the shaky leaf. Now they just have the outline, but you just take it as truth that this person, this information is true without verifying it. So you make a lot of mistakes. You make a huge amount of mistakes, and you're creating this family tree. You're spending hours and hours creating this family tree, and then you have to cut off limbs of your tree because you've made a huge amount of mistakes in there because the stuff that was there was wrong. But what I've started doing is I volunteer a lot here in the area. So I volunteer at the museums and historical societies and Mayflower Society, etc. But so I have access to a lot of historical documents. And as I'm going through a lot of historical documents at the Historical Society, I noticed that scrapbooks, which is a huge overlooked source, scrapbooks have so much information. They have newspapers that are now defunct. They have articles in there. I found my great grandmother's obituary. I found my great great grandfather's obituary in a scrapbook from the
Wow.
1800s.
Oh my
So
goodness.
you find the social history of the people. You find out there's old pen and ink drawings in these scrapbooks. So each scrapbook obviously is personal to the person that created it, and some can
Yeah.
be geared towards World War II, some could be geared towards their profession. I found a history, which is interesting. One of my distant cousins, obviously, was hit by a train. And they detailed the whole thing in this newspaper, everything
Oh
about
my
his life,
goodness.
how old he was, what happened, where it occurred. I mean, but this is stuff I never would have found anywhere else. This is the type of things you can find in scrapbooks. And if you look in Bibles, old Bibles, they have a lot of times they have the whole family history there, which is cool.
Wow.
You can get all kinds of information about who was who, and you're verifying their birthdays or their death dates or even the day they were born. A lot of
Wow,
times
this
they'll
is
put the day that they're
fascinating
born.
stuff.
Yeah.
I love it, Donna.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the cool stuff that people are just overlook. And even old Revolutionary War records, the National Archives has these when people had to prove their Revolutionary War service, a lot of times they would submit uh, needlework. They would have their whole family history in needlework,
Oh my
and they would
gosh.
submit that as part of their proof. It didn't get returned to them. So now there's copies or digitized versions of this online that you can see that maybe your great 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 grandmother created this needlework, and you can look at what the work that she did. How personal is that? I remember looking for one of my grandmothers. I had pictures, as we all do, old Bibles, old
Yeah.
pictures, photo albums, but no names. So I started looking at associated photo albums, the families that were associated with them. And I found the exact same picture of my four times great grandmother, and it had her name on it. So I knew for sure. I got goosebumps on my arm when I found that picture because I was looking face to face at my four times great grandmother that I never knew.
Oh my
These are
goodness.
things that we really need to look at. Don't just go to Family Search, which is great. Don't go to just Ancestry, which again is great. It's expensive, but it's great. But go to these things that are free. Your photo albums, your Bibles, the Historical Society, the boxes of photos. My aunt turned over a bunch of letters that had been sitting in the attic for 30 years. They all belonged to my grandfather. And I started reading these letters from like the 1960s, he's talking about waiting for the birth of his granddaughter, which was me, I
Oh
was
my
like,
goodness.
and then I found some old documents that he had. He has old coins, all kinds of things in there.
Yeah.
But then I found an article that pertained to my four times great grandfather, and
Wow.
it was in his handwriting. I never would have expected that stuff. So look at what you have around you that's free. I always say, look for the free stuff first. That's what you want to look at.
Oh my goodness. This is fascinating. And you mentioned National Archives. Where do people go for this? Is it your local library? Where is National Archives? I don't even know
Well,
where that is.
the National Archives is in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
And
okay.
obviously, it's so cost prohibitive for most of us to go there, not to mention the traffic and everything. But the National Archives is online. You can go, it's NARA. It's the short term is NARA, N-A-R-A, National Archives,
Okay.
but NARA.gov. Just go on there and start searching through Revolutionary War. It's not an easy search engine. I will say it's
Yeah.
not an easy database because there's so much information in there.
Yeah.
But you can go in and look for topics and say military, and then look at Revolutionary War or look at World War II. And some of the documents you just have to realize are not there anymore. Like, for example, my grandfather, he had a lot of his World War II documents that I've inherited. I asked for more from the National Archives in St. Louis. I asked for this information. They're gone. They were destroyed in a fire.
Oh
So there are
my
certain documents
goodness.
that will be gone, but you can find other ways of finding that information to build it up. And I personally put my stuff up online about my grandpa because I think if those documents are missing, then maybe my documents will help somebody else's research.
Yeah,
I like to do that.
absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Well, let's remind everyone how we can contact you. We're about halfway through the show. So,
Okay.
brandelligenealogy.com, finding families, creating memories, reach out to her. You can also, we're going to talk about some of the work samples, reviews, and testimonials as well. But before that, I know you want to talk about, really focus on you can find some free resources. You mentioned a website, familysearch.org. That's one of them that we can use, right?
Right. And FamilySearch.org is wonderful. It's put together by the LDS Church. It's in Utah. Their main facility is in Utah. They have millions and millions and millions of free records online available to everybody. All you have to do is create a free account. Um, a lot of people like to use Ancestry, which is fine. You can use that free. You just have to
Okay.
usually go to your library. You just use the library edition of Ancestry. So you create the account through your library, however they make you access it. And you can't save it and make a tree per se on Ancestry at the library edition, but you can save the documents
Yeah.
into your computer. You can download any of the documents to your computer and save it, and then put it into your own family search tree or genealogy software that you use at home. There's inexpensive, like I said, family search is completely free. You can create a tree online with family
Okay.
search if you want to, but other people have access to it, so it can get changed here and there. Just upload your information. um, go to your historical society, look on there and see how many free items are available just to walk in the door. I mean, sometimes they want a small donation or they want you to join, but I've joined a lot of historical societies and museums around, and the cost is usually under $30. So
Wow.
you can really go in there and they're really helpful. What I've found is that if you reach out, especially to the smaller historical societies, towns,
Mm-hmm.
they're very, very helpful. It's when you start getting to the larger places like New York City that you have
Yeah.
a lot of problems. It's just
Oh
hard
my
to get
goodness.
documents out.
All right. Well, do you mind if I ask you some of the work you've done, how you've helped people? It's always amazing, these stories. And I read some on your website. Could you share some with us?
Sure. Well, I mean, I do a lot of genealogy work for lineage societies like the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Mayflower Society, that type of thing, because people are
Wow.
always interested. But I think one of my favorite researches that I did is I got contacted by a gentleman in Ireland, and he was looking for his Irish uncle or grandfather, sorry, in the United States who fought in the American Civil War. And he had a very common name. I can't remember it offhand, but let's say Tom O'Connor.
Okay.
Very, very common name. I eventually found the information I was looking for, identified his grandfather, and going through it, I was able to find his Civil War pension record, and it
Mm-hmm.
detailed his scars, his marks, his injuries, his children, how tall he was when he went to the hospital. I had it was like 96 pages of
Yeah.
all this personal information. And then I was able to go back in and find the ships that he was on during the Civil War and what battles that he fought in. So, I mean, I brought this so much information about this gentleman to this another gentleman in Ireland, which I mean, he was thrilled to death. And I've worked with another gentleman in England. He was a very, very nice man. I really, really liked working with him. And when I was done, he actually sent me a case of English cherry jelly. It was
Oh my
wonderful.
gosh.
It was just
Oh,
a nice little gesture. They didn't have to do that. It was just a very nice gesture of what he did for me, which I appreciated a lot.
oh my goodness. I love hearing this. And then I just have to point out on your website, there's people saying they highly recommend you. This person, Steve, says, I highly recommend Donna as a go-to genealogist to work on your family trees. Donna's expertise rests with knowing where to look for specific information. There are many records that are not on Ancestry, on My Heritage, but instead in special focus archives and books, which she's reiterated to us. And so the importance of this obviously is shining through. This person telling me that you assisted them just recently in January, you and her daughter, when they were in the process of applying for membership for the National Society Daughters of American Revolution. And initially, she did some of that research on her own, but hit that brick wall, not able to find those, documents. But you were able to find them and submitted them with the initial applications to the NSDAR in Washington, D.C. And everything was approved. They're so happy, and they became members of the local chapter in Rhode Island shortly afterwards. So she, of course, here recommends if you need someone, please reach out to Donna. Should be your first choice. She has expert knowledge in her field, adheres to genealogical guidelines, standards, proof, ethics per board for certification of genealogists. And just curious, are you just working with those in the Northeast, or do you work worldwide or nationwide?
Yeah, I will work with anybody that wants me to help them. I specialize in New England, obviously. I do some work into New York, but it's a little more difficult to get some of the records out of New York. And New York has got its own little enclave, I guess, of the way to get into their records. But I work with anybody. I worked with people from Ireland. I've worked with people from England. I've worked with people from Florida, California. Um, uh, Several people actually from Florida and California, but I work with anybody that wants help with their New England heritage. And I really, really
Oh,
connection to the
there you go.
colonial history of New England. That's my specialty. That's my passion. I descend from several Revolutionary War patriots, several Mayflower passengers. And again, my family's been here since literally since the beginning, when the Mayflower landed in Massachusetts and then migrated into Connecticut and Rhode Island. I have founders in all of those states. So that's my passion, but I will work with anybody. But the difficulty becomes, and I will refer people out if
Yeah.
necessary, when they want me to help in, say, Canada, French Canadian. I can't read French, so I will find them somebody who can help them best. I'm always willing to help people because I really think it's important that we understand who our ancestors were. I really think that's important. And I try to help people as much as I can. And I don't try to gouge people
Hmm.
and try to, nickel and dime them into paying me for things. And I actually usually end up doing more work for people than they pay for anyways, because I want to help them find the answer to their question. I think it's part of my forensic training, looking for
Hmm.
those little clues and trying to look at them a little bit differently. Yeah, but it's also my passion in trying to help people connect with their family because I think it's important. I think it's really important that we understand why we are who we are and
Yeah.
where that came from.
Well, is there a story in particular that you want to share with us about someone you've helped? The ones I've read, but something that really resonates with you that shocked everyone. Is there any good stories like that?
Well, I think I'll relate one of my own personal ones.
Okay.
And as I mentioned to you early on, I always call Ancestry and say that they should have changed their motto to uncovering family secrets around the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's many of us that found out that we have a cousin that we didn't know about. We have a father we didn't know about. We have a mother. Cousins and what we don't know about, right? So
Yeah.
we find out about that through ancestry, find our sisters and whatever. And some people go out actively looking for that. They're actively looking for the father they don't know. They're actively looking for the siblings they don't know. I came up with one time and I thought, I don't know this. Here's a first cousin. Here's a first cousin. I don't know who this first cousin is. I know all my first cousins. Well, when I started doing a little more investigating, it turns out that she may be related to me through my grandfather's World War II time up in New York. Um, I-
Oh.
and and to me, it's no big deal. You know, it happened. It always happens to people we don't know. It's not that big a deal to me. Other people think about it differently. So when I do research and I come upon that unexpected information, I always ask people, hey, I may come up with information that you aren't willing for, or I found some information. Do you want to know it? I don't just throw it out there because people
Yeah. You
differently,
respect there. Yeah,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
you have to respect their boundaries and understand that people may not be willing or able to accept those
Yeah.
unexpected events in their family.
Wow. I mean, funny, just an ironic story without using any website or anything. I found out that my grandfather fathered a child in World War II in the Philippines because we just kept messaging me on Facebook talking, and he was the same last name. And I just said, by any chance, I said, I had rumors about this. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, oh my gosh, we're related. And then he showed me like proof or like letters that my grandfather sent, and just randomly, like we figured that out through social media, which was amazing because it was a big family secret. And I kind of uncovered it just unknowingly, which was pretty darn cool. I loved it. But that fascination, right? And then getting to know that person and family, it opens up a whole new world to some people. And I think that's beautiful to connect people like this. And
And use social media all the time. I've reached out on Facebook and said, "Hey, listen, I'm looking for this uncle that died in such and such a time, such and such a location. This is what I know. Does anybody have any help?" I'm within minutes. I had a response from somebody in the Midwest who called and says, "Yeah, contact my relative here." And she knows all about this information. I contacted her. She gave me all the
wow.
information because my great uncle, who I never knew, was
Yeah.
killed. And
Ah,
and the story that I heard didn't correspond with what I could figure out forensically.
yeah.
So she corroborated what I thought. But then in doing our ancestor DNA, it turns out that we're eighth cousins. We're distant cousins as well. But that was just by a simple Facebook post out there and say, "Hey," into a town page, "Hey, does anybody know?" I always say, if you don't care, if you don't mind, just ask. What's going to hurt if you ask? If nobody answers, okay, you don't know anything less or more than you did before. But how much
Yeah.
more could you learn? I've since I got that, I've gotten my great uncle's World War II uniform. I've gotten the flag that covered his coffin. I've gotten all these little documents he carried around with him in his wallet in the 1940s before he was killed. So, I mean, I got so much personal information and connected to so many other people that then connected me to other people that knew him personally and that I could sit there and talk to, and they could tell me more about his life just by one simple Facebook post. So don't be afraid to
Amazing.
ask. If you
Yeah.
don't ask, you're going to get nothing.
Oh my goodness, I love this work. And by the way, just wanted to mention, you mentioned that you didn't turn to genealogy as your first career if you're just tuning in, but this is fascinating. Something in you, does anyone else in the family have this knack to find out their history? Was it your mom? Was it your dad? Anyone in the family?
No, it's interesting because I was the first one in my family to go to college.
Me too.
My mom, yeah, you too. See, and my mom raised four of us as a single parent after they were divorced. So I
Hmm.
just had to naturally adapt, right? And it just became something I was interested in. My mom always said, "You should be a lawyer," because I asked so many questions, and that's why you should just be a lawyer. But I mean, it
Oh,
wasn't anything I wanted to do. But nobody was ever interested so much in the genealogy. I was the one that came up with it. And then as I started uncovering information, my aunt would give me more information and she'd be impressed by the information. Then she wanted to uncover more information. And the same thing with my grandmother. She would give me some information, but she had like little hints. And the good thing is we did it via email because now I go back 20 years later and I'm re-looking at these emails to see, based on the research I've done over the years,
amazing.
what
Yeah.
can I get from this email now?
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we still have just, oh my gosh, only 2 minutes left of the show. How did you kind of want to wrap things up for today about why people should reach out to you and, of course, get started on their genealogy path?
I think anybody should want to just do the genealogy because some people say, "Oh, it's just a bunch of dead guys. I don't care." But these are your family.
Yeah.
They're really your family. They're in your blood. They're in your genes. They help you decide who you are, and you can
Yeah.
all do this. And I'm willing to help anybody that wants to find out and discover who they are as a person,
Yeah.
not just as names.
Beautiful. And how can we reach out? Do you offer like an initial consultation for someone who's interested?
Yeah, I will do a 1 hour consultation for free. And you can,
Oh, wow.
again, go through my website. You can send me a contact. You can set up an appointment. Any way you want to do it, I'm willing to help out. I really do want to help people out.
Beautiful. And tell us again all the ways that we can reach out to you, please. Thank you.
Do Brandelli Genealogy, Brandelli Genealogy Services. And my website is brandelligenealogy.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Pleasure getting to know you today. Our neighbor very close by. I'm on Long Island, by the way, so you're not too far. And excited that you're here. Exactly, right across the way. Thank you so much for enlightening us. And by the way, this is great, like for the holidays, right? I love. It's a gift that you can give someone in the family to trace back their heritage, to find that person in their past, or it's so exciting. But thank you so much for exciting me. Like, for example, I have my mom's dad. So my grandpa came from Poland. He was in an orphanage. And that's something like I would love to trace back one day to find out what orphanage was he in and to figure it all out and be like, visit, where he was. Those things are fascinating, to live and walk in your ancestors' footsteps too. So,
and you literally get goosebumps. You literally
I do. I just had those. I do. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. All right. Looking forward to the next time we speak. You have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.